Hey everybody, welcome to the Porn Free Millennial podcast. We have a special guest on today, Dr. Gregory Borse. Dr. Borse is it's his fifth time on the podcast, and a very special guest. I feel like the conversations are always just profound that we have, and I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure my audience has as well. And just to introduce Dr. Borse, if you haven't heard, first of all, he was on episodes 14, 21, 28, and 31. Episode 28, Porn is a Vampire. That's the most downloaded podcast that we have to date on Porn Free Millennial. Incredible episode. We did it around Halloween time, and it was fantastic. So today, just to introduce Dr. Borse real quick. PhD of English and professor of English and philosophy at University of Arkansas at Monticello. And Dr. Borse, you teach film as well, correct?
Yeah, I teach film. I teach literary theory at the graduate level. I teach all the lit courses, everything from Homer all the way to mid 20th century. I specialized in Faulkner and literary theory as a PhD. I'm a generalist, so I get to do all the fun stuff that people think they don't need.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And so today I'm going to start with this. Dr. Borse gave me some homework. We've been talking, and it's been great to get to know you two just offline, just personally. And we had this long talk, I think about like a month ago, or about 2 months ago or so, where we talked for a few hours. And Dr. Borse gave me some homework to basically watch The Exorcist. And that we were going to talk about it because if I'm not mistaken, that was a topic of one of your classes, was that movie?
Actually, yeah, I just showed it in my film class this semester.
Wow.
Again, I think it's an incredible film. I think it is often a misunderstood film, but in film history, it's one of those greats that you cannot get away from. And so I go ahead and show it because I think my students' impressions of it are a little bit parodic. You know what I mean? Because it's just so present in the film industry that if you make a horror film, you have to decide what you're going to do with it. And so I didn't watch it again for many, many, many years. And when I picked it back up, I thought it wasn't gonna hold. You know what I mean? It was going to seem cheesy and dated, and it wasn't going to be good. And I was just so wrong about it. That film, William Friedkin is a genius director. William Peter Blatty is a great writer and was very much involved in the making of the first film. When I watched it again, I was gobsmacked at how good it was and surprised that it wasn't scary. And I wanted to ask you about this in the way that I expected it to be scary. It is deeply scary, but it's not a jump scare movie at all. Everything happens right in front of you. There's one little jump scare toward the beginning of the film, and otherwise everything happens right there. And the scariness of it is, I think a lot of it has to do with sound. I don't know if you noticed this while you were watching it, but Friedkin built in a bunch of ambient noise. Yeah. And it goes from these scenes where there's ambient noise that you're vaguely putting you on psychologically on the edge of your seat, these really eerie silences, and then these shockingly loud noises, like when Reagan is being examined in the hospital.
Oh yeah, that scene really was.
It's just
something else.
It's very disturbing. And so I wrote a couple of articles about this in Exorcist 3. And for your viewers, what I would tell them is don't bother with Exorcist 2 or any of the other films. Just Exorcist 1 and 3 really are like part 1 and part 2 of the same film.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I haven't watched Exorcist 3 yet, but I definitely need to, because I was just going to say from my perspective, it was always, I grew up Catholic and I'm Christian, and I think just growing up, I always had this fear of this movie. I think I remember one time when I was a kid, we were on this family trip, I think in some condo in Estes Park, and it was around Halloween time, and I think it was on AMC. They used to do top 10 scary movies or something like that. And I remember The Exorcist came up and they showed some clips, some short clips. And I was just mortified and haunted as a kid seeing that, because of just growing up Catholic. I think Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on that in the teaching, and it's more, I think, as I interpreted it as a kid, more something to be afraid of versus facing. And I think at this point in my life, when you brought this challenge up to me to watch The Exorcist, I think for me, there wasn't a second guess for me, because at this point in my life, right, I've stared evil in the face. I've witnessed it. I've witnessed it in my life, and I'm taking steps in my life today, moving forward, right, to follow Christ and to be aware of the things that can pull me down and that can hold me back and that can deceive me, right? So when you brought this up initially, I did have just a little bit of hesitation of like, okay, should I open up this box, right? And
Yeah.
I watched it last weekend. I was in Estes Park in the mountains, some off-grid campsite. I remember you told me, you said watch it with the lights on, watch it during the day. I definitely did not do that. I watched it at night. It was a roaring storm too, but the winds there were crazy. So it was really kind of funny in my mind that I'm watching like Reagan's bed jolting and my RV's like
Yeah.
moving and shaking, and I'm like, hey, I'm experiencing a similar thing. But yeah, my take on the movie was it was really well made. It was phenomenally well made. It drew me in, and then I think it did a really good job building the characters up so that there was that connection between the mom and her daughter, sister and sister.
Yeah.
And then I loved how they weaved in the community that they had, all these different roles. And it was really interesting, I thought, of the intersections between how people were basically, like, from their perspective, how they were interpreting this situation that was going on. You had the medical community, right? You had a mom that was basically, I think, just at her wits' end, like she didn't really know what to do. And then you had, of course, the Catholic Church there, which was basically like the last ditch option for them. I think when
Yeah.
they're talking to the doctors, they're like, it's kind of like, she's like, is this witchcraft? Basically, you want me to take my daughter to, I think she said, a witch doctor. That's basically
Yeah.
what she said in the movie. And
Yeah.
then you also, which I like too, was the law as well. You had that, uh, basically it was like the detective or the police chief. I think he was like a detective. He was doing his thing on the backside to try to figure out how that guy came, like, fell out of that window, right? So I really loved that because it was basically people trying to make sense out of something that was basically paranormal, that was spiritual based, really. People were trying to make sense out of it with whatever occupation they were in. You had all these
Yeah.
different occupations.
Yeah, you're right. Different frames. Medical community will excuse exorcism as a delusion by a patient that thinks they're possessed so strongly that if you exorcise them, then they'll think they're not anymore. And so it's all a psychological problem. And of course, they exhaust all of the modern scientific ways to see if there's something wrong with their brain. Um, but then from Kindemann's point of view, and that's the police detective,
Yeah,
I wrote an article about this a few years back for Hollywood in Toto. And I said, The Exorcist is a police procedural grades as a horror film. If you follow Kindemann's story, he's just a guy that is investigating what he thinks might have been a murder.
right.
And it's important for your viewers to know that Exorcist 3 is the sequel, not Exorcist 2. And the role of Kinderman is taken up by George C. Scott in a brilliant performance. The actor who played the original Kinderman had died.
Oh, okay.
I think he would have done a phenomenal job because he brought such a wry sense of humor to the whole thing. And George C. Scott matches that in Exorcist 3. But Exorcist 3 is a police procedural. I mean, excuse me, is a horror film that masquerades as a police procedural.
Okay.
And it's the same demon, and now he's after Kinderman.
Oh, okay. Say no more.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so it's fantastic. But going back to Father Marin, brilliantly played by Max von Sydow. And by the way, for your viewers, when you guys watch it, Max von Sydow, when he played that role, was like 42 years old.
Wow.
The
That's
makeup, the
nuts.
makeup that they did for him, which should have gotten the Oscar, let alone. But Marin, the brilliant thing about Marin is that Marin does not fear. He walks into that house and says, there is only one. And for years and years, for the life of me, I thought, this doesn't make sense. Why would this little girl be possessed? Until I realized that in the background, speaking of sound, on several key moments, the demon is calling for Marin. So the whole point of possessing Regan is to use her to get to somebody else, which will dovetail into later portions of our conversation. And the demon is after Marin. And, you know, he ends up failing ultimately. Yes, Marin ends up dying. Spoiler alert. But Karras sacrifices himself,
right,
to release the little girl. And there's something really beautiful in that.
Yeah.
And so in the third film, and I'll just set it up for you guys, we have a reappearance of this demon. And at first we don't know, but it's a murder mystery. It's the same detective. Regan and her family are no longer involved. And it's a continuation of this demon's pursuit. And so, you know, one of the things I wanted to mention was that I'm struck by the fact that there's a quote from G.K. Chesterton in which he says that God will do no thing that he can delegate to one of his creatures because he is caritas. He is charity itself. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But the flip side to that is that the devil can do no thing that he can't seduce one of God's creatures to do for him. And I think this film reflects that direct assault. Did you notice how casually Regan's mother takes the Lord's name in vain?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I realized that right away. I think she was on the phone, like waiting on the line.
When you think about how casually we open these doors, we just open them up. And Father Karras asks her, are you a religious woman? And she says, no. But her chosen way to use expletives is to use curses. And it's, you know, Jesus Christ this and God damn it that, very casually. I'd like to go back and watch the dialogue to see if that sort of goes away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, remembering just recently watched the movie, I'm pretty sure that, yeah, I don't really remember her using God's name in vain as the situation was unfolding in front of her. I think the time that, especially, I think when she goes to the room and Regan's head like turns around fully 360 degrees and slaps her mom, and then that, I think that like cupboard's moving towards her. I really think from that point on, her character changed because there was no medical or cultural way to explain what just happened.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting too with Karras, was he was trying so hard, I think, to rule out this as an exorcism, or at least when he was speaking to the mom. Even though, I mean, he walked into the room and witnessed it, I think he also couldn't really believe that this was happening, because I thought that was a really interesting part of his character, right? Was that he wanted to leave the church. He was losing his faith. He just lost his mom. And then he's drawn back in to his faith because of this direct assault on Regan.
Right. And I find that fascinating too, because it's about a crisis of faith.
Right.
It's the reason that William Peter Blatty wrote it. It got such blowback when it was first premiered. It was a huge, huge phenomenon.
Yeah, I remember I think my mom talking about it and just how she's like, you can't watch that movie. It's terrifying. Even when I told my parents I was going to be interviewing you about this and talking to you about it, my mom was like, no, don't watch it. Don't watch it. You know, I'm sure when she watched it, and I think you guys are around the same age, it was, probably interpreted a little bit differently than watching it as an adult.
Well, my mother, who was a devout Catholic, said, you don't want to see this film because it's about the helplessness of good in the face of evil. And later when I watched it, I was like, no, that's not it at all. That's not it at all. And nothing against my mom, but I don't think
Yeah.
she ever saw the film, because the church immediately came out kind of against it. But
Really?
your viewers need to know that every touchstone in the film regarding investigations of and performances of exorcism is absolutely accurate. I've read the Rite of Exorcism. I included the Rite of Exorcism in my novel, and like even to the point where when Father Marin commands the demon to leave Reagan, the room splits in half.
Yeah. Right.
And as a theological point, that is absolutely accurate, because the one soul that the devil can never possess is the martyr. It's the one that angers him the most, because he cannot get to them. Um, and so those little touches um, are, to me, very important, that the film is actually accurate. And Blatty was very careful to make sure that he was. So when I was writing my book, and we won't get into that, but I had occasion to dip into that, and was able to read the Rite, and I was like, oh my gosh, they followed the Rite. They just followed the Rite. They didn't show you the whole thing.
Sure.
And this particular exorcism, it's based on a true story. Um, it took months. It's not a thing that can happen in a couple of days. Generally speaking, it's exhausting. And I know your viewers probably familiar with Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is also quite accurate. And there's another one with Anthony Hopkins
I think it's called The
called
Right.
The Rite. It's very good. That one's very quietly terrifying. But again, it's also right along the lines of based on a true story, the way that these things actually happen. But what The Exorcist is really talking about is an engagement with evil, as a direct assault. And
Yeah.
I think that we have convinced ourselves that these direct assaults don't really happen. And I think you would agree with me that the smartest thing the devil ever did for the modern age was convince everyone that he didn't exist. And I think that's the world that we kind of live in now. So The Exorcist is a great reminder that no, the devil's after everybody all the time. Um, and it's not simply a matter of passively avoiding evil. It's a matter of actually combating it, which I admire you for doing, because I think that's part of what your mission is. Um,
Definitely.
so
Yeah.
anyway,
And something that you were saying struck me was, I think initially when Father Marin and Karis are walking into the room, I think for the first time, Father Marin is just to Karis says, "Don't listen to anything she says. Don't converse
right,
with her. Everything she says is lies." And I think that's an important thing to remember in these subtle assaults, right?
yeah,
Is to understand, and I think with porn, especially from my point of view, is I'm not going to listen to any of these justifications that I used to
right,
have in my mind because I had so many justifications. I had so many reasons for why I needed to have porn in my life. And at the end of the day, that really struck me when I was watching. It hit me pretty hard because it was really relatable to me. I wasn't really thinking of this direct assault, but I was thinking about this subtle assault that destroyed my life at a time, right? It
yeah,
didn't fully take me out, but it got close to where even I wanted to take my own life. That would have been the end of it, right? That would have been the
yeah,
end of my story. And because I let these lies in my head and I started to believe these lies, I started to converse with these lies instead of seeking truth,
yeah,
seeking Christ. And that's what saved my life was seeking Christ and praying at my darkest hour to God. And I think that's something that's beautiful about the movie. Even though these guys put down their lives for Reagan, the movie ends where she's released of this demon
yeah,
because of the work that others did to save her, right? And I think that's
yeah,
something that we're all obligated to do in our lives with the people that we love the most is to be there for them in those moments and to I think carry Christ into that, to carry the light, to carry truth into that. And I do think it takes, I think everyone in our lives, you, me, people listening, have people like that And if you don't know them yet, they'll show up at some point they're going to walk that walk with you and put themselves out on the line, sacrifice like Father Merrin and Karras did in this movie. And but yeah, I love the approach of it, thinking about their two different personalities and how they walked into the exorcism. And I think the confidence of a seasoned veteran like Maris, and then really a younger guy like Karras, but still, I mean, he's like basically top of the order at their church.
Right.
Has all this training from John Hopkins and all these degrees, and he's still shaken, but Maris is right there saying, "Hey, let's keep going," that kind
Right.
of thing. And oh man, this is such a good movie. I'm so happy that I watched it because I think you asked about this earlier on when we started to talk, but I was expecting like the whole time a jump scare and I didn't get one. And I was really happy about that because I just thought that it made the movie so much richer and more powerful and more
Yeah.
real. Was that it didn't have to rely on jump scares. It just had to rely on what I still think are really good special effects that they did, like practical effects and everything. I was pretty blown away at how uh, I'd say Reagan's like makeup and all they did with with the projectile vomit and the bed and all this stuff. I mean, it still holds up. I think it's in my mind, it's like Jurassic Park where you see this stuff and you're like, wow, that was
Yeah.
made how long ago?
Yeah.
And it still looks good. That's crazy. I mean, there's a few parts, but I think it adds to the flavor of the movie. Some of that stuff. But man, they really
Well,
shot films different back then.
and Friedkin too, as a director, he played tricks. He shot guns off when people didn't expect it to keep them on edge. In the scene when Reagan's mother is thrown across the room by her daughter, she actually broke her tailbone
No kidding.
and just kept acting.
Wow.
Um, the room in which you can see their breath,
Yeah, yeah.
that Friedkin built that room. It was a refrigerator. That was real. They filmed all of those scenes so that the breath, they didn't have to fake it.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of that behind the scenes. It's a lot of, the Reagan coming down the stairways upside down like a spider. That was a contortionist,
Really?
body double.
No kidding.
She did it. I think she was wearing a wire to make sure that she didn't slip or fall, but like she did that stunt. So there's some amazing behind the scenes. And by the way, speaking of jump scares, Exorcist 3 has the single greatest jump scare in the history of film.
Oh gosh. Okay.
You have to watch it
might have to watch this tonight.
you have to watch it for that alone.
Okay.
It is so effective. It's ridiculous. Um, so that'll put you on the edge of your seat. Plus, who's that pro basketball player from the 1980s? Ewing.
Okay.
He's in it.
Wow.
He's in Exorcist 3. And sometimes I hate that kind of thing, like it's stunt casting, but it really works in this. It's in a sequence, and he just appears. And
Okay.
it's like, you're kidding me, really?
Patrick Ewing.
Because Patrick Ewing, because he's so recognizable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it works because of the scene that it's in. It gives a real texture and depth to the scene. So anyway, I recommend it highly for anybody who's interested in it. No, but back to the direct indirect assault.
Yeah.
The world that we live in today, it's good to be reminded that the indirect is so soft and so dangerous.
Yes.
That we have to be reminded that evil doesn't have anything of its own to work with. It's only got good. And so, you can't think of I think we've also been sold on the idea that evil is the opposite of good. It's not. It's the privation or perversion of good, because that's all it has to work with. And so you're mentioning, Reagan being delivered at the end. She doesn't remember any of it, and she's completely and wholly innocent.
Right.
And this is a beautiful reminder of what sin is touching upon and what we're participating in.
That's pretty profound.
Yeah, the kiss that she bestows on the priest's cheek is just so pure and inspired. You know what I mean? because she looks at him puzzled because she doesn't know who he is. And she sees his crucifix and she kisses him.
Yeah, that
And
was a beautiful spot. I really liked that. It gave me goosebumps in a good way seeing that.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, highly recommended. It's not the film that most people think that it is. But I think if we make a new one or we do another podcast on a different film, my wife would be upset with me that I said this, but Eyes Wide Shut
Yeah, I
starts
still haven't watched that.
into the
Yeah, I think I'll have to watch Eyes Wide Shut with my eyes shut at certain parts.
yeah, it's about the worldly man, the Jonah who's been swallowed but doesn't realize he's inside the belly of the whale. And so he can't be delivered because of his blindness of the about the world that he actually is participating in. And that goes to that whole idea about how these dangerous cults work, where people get ensnared in them because they're offered these rewards, these worldly rewards. You've been invited into a secret society where only the few are allowed to witness and participate in these special things. And the whole time you're doing it, you feel like you're moving up and up and up and getting more and better, and the whole time you're actually, it's the screw is actually screwing down around you. So as you look up, it looks like you're moving up, but you're not. You're moving down. And by the time you realize where you are, you lose hope. And that's one of the messages in The Exorcist itself. So Karis asks Marin, why is he doing this? And Marin says he wants us to lose hope. And in the old Catholic theology, the suicide was buried
Oh,
apart, could not be buried in a Christian hallowed ground because they had sinned against the Holy Spirit and refused salvation. We no longer do that, by the way, because we don't know what's going on in a human soul, even in the case of a suicide.
right.
And we've acknowledged that. But the theology behind it is that, back in the Middle Ages, they thought of it as the unforgivable sin. Now, I would not argue that there is any such thing, but it is one of the most dangerous things, is to lose hope. Because what is the effect of losing hope? The effect of losing hope is to completely launch upon a probably self-destructive path, right?
Yeah.
I do this thought experiment in my classes, in my philosophy classes sometimes, where I say, what would be the effect if we knew exactly when we were going to die and how? Probably 2/3 of the population would say, I'm just going to do whatever I want. That's why the Greeks, Prometheus give knowledge of his death, but without the knowledge of when and how, to give him hope and to put in perspective the importance of the things that we do moment to moment to moment in our lives. So death is the great civilizer. When we lose hope, we lose the mooring that gives all of our actions meaning. All the social media platforms are seducing young people to chase a kind of worldly prize, which is robbing them of the significance of their existence, for shallow and temporary things. Notice that about porn. Porn's temporary.
Yeah.
And so whatever pleasure, whatever kick you get out of it is temporary. Porn operates. You're attracted to a good thing, and sex is good. Bodies are good. But it's temporary. And so you have to go back. And then you go back and you go back. And after a while, what was enticing you before isn't enough. Am I correct?
Correct.
It's just like the addiction to anything. And so you have to go down these avenues. And that's that corkscrew that I was talking about. You're going down and down and down. And when you look up or try to get air, you're like, wait a minute, how did I end up here? You know what I mean? I hope, because we never lose our own human dignity. So there's always that part of you that knows that there's something deeply wrong here.
Yeah. And I think like that hits on the nail on the head with just that feeling of something being deeply wrong and just not understanding that each time we give in to this temptation, we give in to this addiction, we follow this road, we don't really see the screw that's turning, 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 turning. Because I think with porn, the interesting thing about it that might be a little bit different from other addictions is with porn, when that screw is going around and around and around and around, I think it's a lot harder to understand that and to see it in your life because it's so subtle. And compared to other things like substances, whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Those things I think you can tell a little bit easier with your physical health, right? For a lot of them, with alcohol, with certain drugs, things like that, you can start to see how it's affecting your body, how it's
Yeah.
affecting your mental capacity. But the thing that's difficult with porn, right, is one of the quotes my brother told me that he's a therapist, and we had one podcast where he's talking about how he works with people that have drug addictions, but the people also have normally a porn addiction too. And they're just saying that quitting porn is a lot harder than it is to quit a drug, to quit meth or to quit heroin or to quit cocaine, things like that, just because porn's not going to leave you in a body bag. It's if you're not really in a relationship, you might not be able to really notice what effects it's taking on you. Or, if you're single too, there's definitely still an effect on you that's happening. And maybe that's why you're not in a relationship. I know past relationships I was in, I mean, every relationship in my life that ended was definitely related to my porn use and a byproduct of that relationship, right? But I think the thing about like that corkscrew analogy or that screw analogy really is you're just drilling down, but you still have that feeling that this isn't right or this isn't what I want to be doing, but you're not quite getting those consequences or hitting maybe that stud in the wall, or if you're drilling into the ground, hitting that bedrock. And maybe that's why they call it rock bottom, is like you hit this rock when the screw hits. And that's what you're talking about is you take a look up and you ask yourself, wow, how did I get here? How am I so deep in this hole? And
Yeah.
it's just through these subtle, small decisions that we make on a daily basis, right? Where we might make one decision that is positive, that's we're not screwing down, no, we're going up in our elevation and our growth. And then there's other decisions that we make that subtly start to screw us downward.
Yeah. Well, another thing that occurs to me is in the Catholic rite of penance, which is confession.
Yeah.
At the end, we say a prayer called the act of contrition. And then in the act of contrition, we ask God, we tell God that we're sorry that we have sinned, because God is all good and deserving of all of our love, and mainly because it is offensive to Him, and we owe Him a certain kind of gratitude for our human dignity. But before we say Amen, one of the things we say is, with the help of thy grace, promise to sin no more and to avoid the near occasion of sin.
Mm.
So I had a young man come to me and ask me about an entanglement he was involved in, and I asked him to flip the end of the act of contrition. He wasn't Catholic. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, are you sure that you want to be involved in a situation where you're being the near occasion of sin for somebody else?
Mm. Yeah.
Which is the way these lifestyles turns us into a seducer. Fundamentally changes the way we look at other people, and we look at them as means, not as ends. Not as the Reagan that we see at the end of that film, but as the mundane, modern world with a Ouija board in her basement and talking to Mr. Howdy.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And we kind of say, well, that's not these are two consenting adults, and so it's fine. But I asked them to think about that. Just picture that. Picture that person sitting on their bed asking themselves, why did this happen to me again? Every time I think I'm giving what they're asking me to give because it will turn into something substantial, and it never does. And so I think that's an important question that we need to ask ourselves from the point of view of participating even in porn, when we've convinced ourselves that it's nothing but consenting adults. They all signed a piece of paper. They're doing this of their own volition. I'm participating in my own volition. It's all good. But as I put up on X the other day, participation in evil makes you ugly over time. And I'm amazed. Sometimes when I look at people, I'm like, what are they even doing? And it might not be, you know what I mean? It might not be drugs. It might not be, but it does. It ends up showing. But it's pernicious because it takes so long.
Yeah, and I can relate to this. What you were saying, this is a great, really important point for people listening, was when you're engaging in porn, you start to become a seducer. And I saw that throughout periods of my life. When I was in high school, when I was in college, even my marriage too, I remember just basically, I think, having this thought in my head of, okay, well, maybe we need to spice things up a bit instead of just going to the Bible and following the teachings of Christ. And I think basically what I'm trying to say is throughout my life, when I was really in the grasp of my porn addiction, I brought in and opened the door to a lot of negative, a lot of, I'd say, evil things. And like you said, it's over time, right? So I struggled with it since I was 10, and then I brought it into my marriage, and then just complete devastation in its wake.
Yeah.
I mean, I never go a day without thinking about just the pain that I don't sit in shame anymore about it. I think I've been able to really get through that. But I always think about it. I think about just the pain that I caused my ex, and just the look on her face of disappointment and anger and hurt.
Yeah.
And that's because I let that door open. I wasn't protecting my marriage. I wasn't protecting my house. I wasn't protecting the people around me with my actions that, like you said, you do these things where you think it's victimless, or like you said, it's consenting adults, which through a lot of research of the porn industry, I think it's more of an exception now. It's to have consenting adults. I think there's a lot of evidence that's been proven that a lot of it is non-consenting adults. I think that really changed when porn became more user driven,
Yeah.
more, hey, post it. I mean, great book. I plug it a lot in this podcast, but Takedown by Lila McElwaite. She's on X too. She did a lot of work to uncover really the underbelly of the porn industry and just how they were exploiting people like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's an important point, because I think that's a justification that a lot of people use. I used it before too, of consuming porn, is just this justification that, hey, I'm consenting, they're consenting, everything's by the book. But at the end of the day, like you were saying, I think it opens the door for us to make poor decisions in our lives. Because I think in the very heart of it, in some ways too, I think about this, it's a very selfish thing to do, is to basically go in your room, lock the door, turn off the lights, open up the laptop, have the phone, and then consume porn by yourself in secret for your own pleasure. And then I think the audacity or the selfishness to keep this as a lie, as a secret, typically from your wife or your girlfriend, or just other people if you're not dating anybody. But it's basically, I think, in a lot of ways, which is just the opposite of what is good, is to be selfish. And I think porn is a perfect example of that selfishness, to where it's
Yeah.
completely about you. It's not about anybody else, right? It's not, you don't think about anyone else but yourself. And what I've found in my life is when I focus on being selfless and thinking about other people and doing selfless acts, there's not a appetite for me to consume porn because I
Yeah.
see the value and the positive impacts that are made when I'm not being selfish in private. And I think you can be selfish and it's not like a sin exactly all the time. Like there's times where you need to be focused on yourself. But I find typically if you're focused on yourself so that you can be a better help to others, a better service to others, I
Yeah.
think that's a different kind of selfishness, right? I don't even know if that's a word for it, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think part of this conversation, what I wanted to discuss and what I think you do a great job of doing is opening up a different perspective for people to think about their relationship with porn, right? Because until you hear something like this, you might not have that kind of thought in your head
Yeah.
about this relationship. You might have that thought, that justification that, hey, it's I'm consenting, they're consenting, no one's getting hurt. But like you're saying, and I feel like I've been talking for a little bit. I'll hand it over to you, but I think there is that hidden cost of porn, not just to your relationships. And like you're saying, a subtle assault on the foundations of what makes a fulfilling life, a fulfilling partnership with somebody else, a fulfilling partnership with your creator. I think porn
Well,
undermines all of that.
it does. And think of this. The first relationship established by God, in the garden is marriage. Um, and one of the things that we Catholics believe about the sacrament is that the sacrament is conferred by the spouses upon each other, not by the priest upon them. The only sacraments in the church that are conferred by a priest are exclusively by a priest are the sacrament of confirmation and priestly orders.
Hmm.
Okay, they require the laying on of hands. Um, but an adult practicing Catholic can baptize. I can baptize. I don't. We don't do it as a normal practice, but in an emergency, if I needed to, I would. If I met somebody in a car accident who'd never been baptized and wished to be baptized, I could do it. But the sacrament of marriage is conferred by the spouses upon each other. And we believe that the love that my spouse has for me is vouchsafed by God, Christ's love for me that I can only know through my spouse, and vice versa. To your point about the fact that porn undermines that fundamentally relational and sacred relationship that you can have with another person, is absolutely spot on.
Yeah, because you're basically inviting. I was interviewing a counselor, Jeannie Hoskin, and she was saying when you're watching porn, you're inviting other people into your bedroom,
Yeah,
and really quickly that bedroom gets really crowded, really fast,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we don't think about that, right? Because it's digital. Hey, and that's the craziest thing that I think about right now. This very moment it hit me. There's this justification to saying, well, it's online. I'm not doing it with anybody else.
right.
I'm not cheating on you. I mean, that's how I felt. I was like, I'm not cheating on you. I'm just watching porn,
Yeah,
which is, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about that, right? Because yeah, you
yeah,
are. You literally are.
yeah,
You're literally giving your seed to this other individual or individuals and not
yeah,
to your spouse.
yeah,
And that's hurtful and that's going to create a schism in your relationship and your intimacy and your trust. I mean, it's just logically true that you are definitely cheating and you
yeah,
are sharing the room, your bedroom, most sacred place really, where love is consummated.
yeah,
You're sharing that with hundreds, thousands of different people,
yeah.
you know?
Um, no, I totally agree with you, and it's a violation. This is I think we've talked about this before, but the word obscene means sacred, that which cannot be shown. And porn, of course, violates the that which is sacred, which is not supposed to be public. There's a reason, you take a look at the Greek art, men naked all over the place. Why? Because our reproductive organs are on the outside of our body. But the gods, in designing the female body, they made her body secret. And so Venus, the Venus de Milo, right? She is a nude, but she's also covered, right? That's not something that you show. And so I think it speaks to the idea that in the culture that we live in, we worship the youthful body. And then we convince ourselves that as long as it's consenting, there's nothing sacred, right? And of course, as long as you can convince the culture that there's nothing sacred, and yet weirdly, in all of these cultures, it's a well, that you can do whatever, whenever you want. Correct?
You're saying you could do whatever you want whenever you want,
Right.
culturally?
I mean, yeah, like that. We say that,
Right.
but it's only in the elite circles that people are given the keys that gain them access through that gate into that room where they get to participate in P. Diddy's freak offs. And oh, by the way, we need you to sign this non-disclosure agreement when you walk in the door. So why is it secret? Like, what is the seducing part of its being secret and special and something that only the chosen few get to participate in, the beautiful people get to participate in, and yet it's held on TikTok and everything else as if it's available to everybody. It's not. I don't know. I find that a puzzling feature of the reality that we live in.
Yeah, and just to drill into that, no pun intended, I was listening to a podcast with Andrew Huberman, which he's done a great job actually talking about porn. He's a neuroscientist for Stanford, pretty popular podcast, but he was just talking about evolutionarily, we've never seen this before, to where basically as a man, you have access to the most beautiful, youthful, desired women on the planet on your smartphone.
Right.
You literally can just look up, hey, who's the most beautiful actress, or who's the most beautiful woman in the world? And now I want to see her with her clothes off. And you can do that. And now there's deep fake technology that's advanced. I mean, you can even create your own AI porn if you want to go that way, right? So we're faced with this, I think, as men and women too now. I think it's on the rise with women, unfortunately, porn use. Statistically, that's what it shows. The data is that porn use for women's on the rise as well. But basically, like you're saying, is it's this culture that we have in America, especially, to where, yeah, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you're not hurting anybody, is typically what's stated. But I think I'm starting to realize, and I have more of like a libertarian political philosophy about things, but I think the word harm is starting to change in my mind of what that word actually means. Because I do think that porn does cause harm. It causes a lot of harm. It doesn't just cause harm to the people being exploited in the industry, because I think that there's great harm there. And the women that are captured by this industry, even if it's something like OnlyFans, if they're just on their own, there's still some deep harm there, I think, psychologically and to their bodies, even. But not only that, but I think harm to ourselves and to our identity and our values. And so I just brought that up just because, like you were saying, culturally, we live in this world now to where it's instant access to whatever vice you want. That could be porn, that could be gambling. I mean, the amount of, I'll have to talk about this sometime, but I can't even watch sports anymore, just because if you're watching ESPN or you're just watching NFL Sunday or something, every single retired football player, basketball player, you name it, they're telling you what they're betting on. Hey, hey, Max bets are here, Gregory's bets are here.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because now with DraftKings and all these different apps that you can do, I mean, in Colorado, there's some states that still, I think you can't do it, thankfully. But
Right.
in Colorado, I mean, I could I could just bet my whole savings on literally, hey, are the Broncos going to kick a field goal? Are they going to score a touchdown? Are they going to punt it? You can literally just bet your whole life savings on that. And really, what's holding you back from that, right? And I think it's the same thing that goes for porn is you're basically betting your marriage, your relationship, your integrity on these digital images that are bringing you sexual gratification, and they're literally at the palm of your hand,
Right.
right?
And who really have we met
Right.
that at the end of the day is actually fulfilled by any of it?
I haven't found them yet.
I haven't either. And I've told my students that I'm like, I get the enticement of hookup culture, but do you guys know anybody who's actually happy in it? Because I haven't met them yet. I see people that are sad, and longing and wishing for fulfillment. And I'm just like, you're going down the wrong, you're not going to find it there. And look, I am a red blooded American man. I get the enticement. I do. And I get the fooling ourselves into thinking, well, if I only do it this, it's temporary and then I can walk away. But you know, that's the bait. Wait until the switch comes.
Yeah,
Um,
the bait of the master.
yeah. And so, you're watching the whole thing with R. Kelly and with P. Diddy, watching a train wreck happen in slow motion in real time. And it's the end result of somebody who ended up with enough money and power to be able to simply make their own porn world. Like, okay, I'm going to do this. That's the next step. I'm not going to watch it. But again, it's the vampire principle. What is P. Diddy doing? He's getting people to participate in their own destruction. And you can see it because he's clearly not a happy man.
Right.
And if you watch that film of him beating up his girlfriend in that hotel hallway, what is the point of that? If you have at your fingertips anybody you literally want, then why would it matter if she walked out of the hotel room?
Yeah, it's
So
about control and power.
exactly. So it's not even about the sex and stuff. It's about the way that sex is used to enslave.
Yeah, and I think personally about this happening in our own lives, right? This situation of, and I've made some posts about this concept, and maybe I can bounce it off you, but I do see porn as a form of blackmailing yourself sexually because basically you think that you're getting something out of it. And in some regards, you have this power in your own mind, right? And I think that's oftentimes when I'm working in recovery groups and stuff, this is something that comes up, but some people will go to porn if they feel powerless because it gives them that sense of power. It gives them that sense of control, right? Because basically, I can pull up whoever I want. They're completely subservient to me. They're doing this all for me, for my pleasure, and I can get it at my fingertips, right? But like you're talking about, and I think sometimes people will say this too, is, well, people just go to porn because they have this sexual urge that they need to meet because,
Right.
we're all men and we're just walking penises basically, which I think is completely false. But I think there is that element of power to where you have that control in your life. Maybe there's things outside of your control in your marriage. You feel like I can't fix this, or I messed up and she's still mad at me. Well, hey, I'm going to go to porn because I can just watch these beautiful women at my fingertips, basically.
Right.
But like you're saying, I think it does make you miserable. It makes you angry. I remember, and this might have been just being young and growing up, but I used to get so angry. I used to get so angry. I had so much anger. I had so much anger. And now in recovery, being sober, there's little to no time in my life, really, I'm being dead serious, where I've been angry.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had righteous anger, I think, at times, like where I might read something about Pornhub, or I might
Yeah.
think about something in my life to where, hey, I'm going to write about this. This really fires me up, this concept. But I've never been like angry at other people and like
Right.
projecting on other people. And when I was really in the porn mind, I just get so angry. I get so set off all the time. Right. And maybe that's because I was so used to this power that I had. And well, I don't have power over this situation. So now I'm going to project my anger to control the situation.
Yeah, the flip side to power and control is agency. And so all of the people that get seduced to it who have abuse in their own background are simply seizing agency.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're saying, okay, I'm going to choose this, and if I choose it, then I have power over it, and that doesn't work either. Um, but it does
Mm.
give somebody a sense of temporary mastery. And again, it's one of the traps. It seems
Yeah.
to me.
I mean, we did that podcast, right? The
Yeah,
last one we did together was about that whole OnlyFans situation where
yeah,
I won't say her name, but she slept with a bunch of dudes. And I think what we talked about was just, that that's going to really psychologically affect her, and it already is, I'm sure.
oh yeah, absolutely. And
But
it's gonna it's gonna be with her for the rest of her life.
yeah,
It's going to be interesting to see how it's either going to be a long road of rationalizing and promoting, or there's going to be a conversion moment. And those are the only two I see playing out. There's no walking away from it. And so, my hope for her is that she will have a wake up moment where she'll realize how much damage she's done to herself, to the men that participated in, the people that watched it and paid money for it. I think, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's amazing. It's just one of the conflicted relationships I have with monetization. If X tells me one day that I'm making money off of it, finally, I'll be like, all right, cool. Because I'm doing good stuff. But on the other hand, there's a that wants to say, I don't want to make money out doing this.
yeah. I mean, I got monetized pretty quick. I mean, I haven't really made a ton of money, really,
Right.
but yeah, I've definitely had that conversation with myself too, right? Because I think it can be a really slippery slope once you start getting that attention, you start getting that the money coming in, then it's like, okay, well, what direction are you going with whatever content you are driving, whatever content you're creating? Are you going to go for, hey, what gets the most clicks?
Right.
And that's really what I try to avoid, right? One thing that I see a lot that happens in my space when I see people write about porn or talk about it, I can tell right away from the thumbnail or the artwork, whatever's put on their page, if they're acting in good faith. Because if I see something where it's a half naked woman on there,
Yeah.
I'm like, you're definitely not doing this because
Yeah.
you don't really understand what's going on here because you literally just triggered somebody with clickbait of some attractive woman to get someone to read about why porn's bad for them. That makes no sense to me. But
Right.
I see the pull to where sometimes I've had that thought in my mind. I'm like, and I've never done it because I'm just never going to do that because I think that's crap. But
Yeah.
you do sometimes. It's like, hey, if I could grow faster if I did this, I could grow faster if I did that. But
Yeah.
then you start breaking with your integrity, you start breaking with your moral compass, your values.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I think just to tie it back to the whole P. Diddy thing and all that is, I mean, of course, and with Harvey Weinstein and all this stuff, Epstein as well, right? Is the people that partnered with these people, got fame, money, privilege, but at the same time, there's probably some video of them locked in the vault of them molesting some underage girl or just doing something completely terrible. And I think that's what brings it back into porn too, and why that keeps us in that cycle of shame and secret is because you could look back and be like, "Oh my gosh, I watched that. I watched that thing." I'm sure I
Yeah.
watched. I'm not going to go back through my whole history, but I'm pretty sure I watched some non-consensual stuff. Definitely, because there was always that
We
escalation. Not like I was seeking it, but it's just that's where the funnel takes you with porn
Yeah,
is
and you can't know.
yeah,
100% you can't know. And so that's the other thing people need to remind themselves of. And don't forget this. The reason that Weinstein went down, the reason R. Kelly went down, the reason P. Diddy is going down, the reason Epstein went down is because this is the way the industry protects itself.
Mm.
It eats its own.
Mm. Mm.
And at a certain point, somebody gets chosen as the sacrificial lamb so that we can keep this up.
Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah. Yeah. They don't care.
Right. They don't care. They gets picked. And it was P. Diddy's turn. Like
Right.
because P. Diddy is a dime a dozen to this whole exploitation industry. And so I have a theory about these girls, these young actresses out in Hollywood who all seemingly went crazy. Those were the girls that said no. Britney Spears said no. And they tried it. You know what I mean? They tried it. And there are other examples that you could look at and think, what happened to that person? You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, that's what happened. This person said no. And because they said no, they had to be destroyed because there's nothing else for it. And so, Britney Spears has to be driven out and back in Louisiana and made to look crazy every day. I'm just saying, if you don't say yes to this stuff and you don't, they're going to be able to use against you later, then they will destroy you if they need to. A friend of mine came in and said, hey, I'm running for office. I would like your help. And I said, of course. I said, but you have to understand that my persona on social media has made me completely immune, which was by design, of ever being asked by anybody to do anything in politics for the rest of my life.
That's funny.
That, and you know me on X. I'm a meta me. I play up the big vanity thing. But I do it on purpose because I want to remind people that it's all vanity. All of it's vanity. It's that great line in the movie Moonstruck. Everything is temporary, right? So anybody who's on social media who is not, who's pretending that they're not driven by a certain kind of vanity, including me, including you, including Jordan Peterson, including all the people that we admire, are just fooling themselves. So I think it's a good reminder that the terrain that we are participating in and even combating in is as the Italians would say, molto pericoloso. It's very dangerous. And you got to wake up every day and you've got to remind yourself not to buy your own press. And you got to remind yourself that success is the most dangerous thing in the world. And so no matter how successful you become, Mac, doing what you're doing, you've got to give it up and say, it's not me. It's not me. I'm doing something for the greater good. And whether I get anything out of it or not, that's not the point. Me and my colleagues, and I have some really great colleagues that do the right things for the right reasons every day. We remind ourselves, like, yeah, we're gonna get punished for this. We're not going to be rewarded, but we're not going to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that. If I just stopped writing and stopped podcasting today, I'd look back on that and still be proud of it because I've had people
Yeah,
reach out to me and I've had people in my own life that have struggled with porn that are doing well now. And I could just look back at that and say, hey, that's good enough. Just helping people out at that point in time,
yeah, yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And I think that the people watching ought to keep that in mind as well, because you and I are aware of some great personalities who are doing some really really great things that we admire a great deal
Right.
for what they're doing. But for as many of those that we know of, we probably know of dozens that came to great success and then the great fall because they started thinking it was them. It is, in a way, it is them, okay? Because God won't do anything he can delegate to one of his creatures. If you're truly engaged in the good, you have to remember it's about the good. And what you're trying to leave behind is something that will go on without you and doesn't depend upon you to be accomplished. And I think that's where people also get seduced by success. They
Yeah.
think that the good is dependent upon them. And it's the other way around.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. Yeah, because you see that so much, I think, just in social media. It could be any platform really, but it's like this drive towards things that aren't attainable. And but then it catches on. I was listening to this podcast, it's really interesting, but they're basically just it might have been actually a YouTube channel just talking about just how things it was actually about the dead internet theory. I don't know if you've ever heard about the dead internet theory. It's really
All right.
fascinating. I'll send you this YouTube video after we're done, but basically just
Thank you.
talking about how the internet really in its form when it started, right, was just so free and fun and curious, and now it's really, I think, after these social media companies, I think started to all become the same in some ways.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because I think social media companies at the beginning, like with Facebook, MySpace, you would use them for different means, so to speak, or they had a different kind of flow to them. I really like Substack, by the way. I think Substack's bringing back some of that old time feel that you had when I was younger. But basically, the dead internet theory, it's just all these platforms now are just so driven off of monetization, or at least for
Yeah.
the creators, it's like that carrot that's dangling, so that when a big influencer makes a video, then you just have a bunch of people either trying to replicate what they just did, maybe with something a little bit different. And maybe that is just artists and art in general is you're taking something and then you're putting your own flair on it. But
Yeah.
in some ways, though, which is really interesting with the TikTok and some other social media platforms, it might be like a song or a certain thing, and then people like replicate it. And then if you want to start out and get monetized and make money off of this, it's almost like you have to hop on that bandwagon,
Yeah.
and you're not really being authentic because you're just trying to catch like that wave of like whatever's popular. And
Right.
typically what's popular, it seems like, are the things that play on your anger, play on seduction, play on things, on emotions. Fear is a big one too, obviously,
Yeah.
that I think end up drilling us downwards into this spiral to where if you want to be unique and be positive, I think it's hard to do. It's still not impossible. There's a lot of, I think, people that have big audiences that are positive, that are good voices of reason. But it's definitely, I think, a harder room to get in that regard. But I don't know what your take is on that, but I do think that that's a interesting thing just to point out. I think where we're all consuming this stuff, we're just massive consumers. And then when we are
No, I
creating something, it's are we actually creating something, or are we just trying to hit the algorithm, whatever the algorithm's driving us to do?
right. And how are we being molded by not just the algorithm, but by the industry itself? I've done a couple of podcasts with AJ Steele, and apparently I said some things that you're not supposed to say, and YouTube just buried it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with my YouTube channel and with X too, I had that suspension on X, which was crazy, just for
Yeah.
saying I literally, hey, our podcast, Porn is a Vampire, plug. But I said on a comment, I think someone was just saying ban porn on X, and I just said, hey, porn's a vampire. It's an industry that feeds off of not just the workers, but also the people that are watching it. And
Yeah.
I was suspended for 2 months. I probably would still be suspended if I just didn't. I just ended up deleting it. I was going through my taxes and needed to access some things. So I'm like, what the heck? I still want to
Yeah.
get my stuff out. I'm not going to just lay here because I remember like right away when it happened, I was shocked, and then I sent in a request for it to be overturned, and they just said no, and
Yeah.
it was flagged as violent speech. And I think that, and then with YouTube, I mean, gosh, I mean, even a video as great as the ones that we've recorded, I mean, they're not really getting a ton of views, probably because we say the word porn or the word porn is in my tagline or whatever. And we're actually talking about things that are healthy, that are beneficial, that are critical thinking. And meanwhile, I mean, still the porn industry gets billions and billions of views a year online,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, at the end of the day, though, I'm not going to change what I'm saying and what I'm talking about, regardless, right? I mean, I could get tricky and just
And
bleep out every time I say the word porn, but I'm just not going to do it because
well,
the word needs to
don't
be
put it
said.
past them to maybe you're being censored because you're saying porn is bad.
Yeah, I've thought that a few times.
You know what I mean? That could be it. So I don't know. It's the Wild West out there right now, but the market has a way of working these things out. And if you get a large enough following, and there are enough out there that make it so lucrative for other people to say, "Look, there's a market for this," then you're going to win ultimately. And so, in that sense, don't stop.
Right.
I do think ultimately the good is going to prevail. There's no avoiding that. The end of the story has already been written, folks, and it's a happy ending. So now you get to choose what part of the happy ending you're, no pun intended, you're going to participate in, because we know how it ends, and it's good. And that's the part that makes me a little bit sad, because it's like, that's what makes me a happy warrior. And I do everything with a smile on my face. I'm not depressed. I'm concerned. I have kids. I have going on 8 grandchildren. Um, and I'm worried about the world that I'm going to leave behind for them, which is another one of the reasons I gave that lecture on arts and humanities and civilization a couple of weeks ago, which I think I sent you a link to.
Yeah.
Um, and if they want to get to know me better, they can go to YouTube, go to Gregory Borse, and just click on my picture. And the first thing that's going to come up is an hour-long lecture on that, if they're interested. Um, and it'll give you a little bit of flavor of what I look like when I'm doing this in the classroom, which, by the way, I'm glad I did, because I finally figured it out. I'm good in interviews. I'm not good at just like taping myself. I hate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
But then my dean has this speaker series, and he said, "Would you like to do one?" I was like, "Absolutely." And then I didn't know he was going to film it, but he did. I'm like, "Oh, that's what I need to do. It's got to be a Jordan Peterson thing, where I'm just in an auditorium giving a lecture to a bunch of live people, and I don't know there's a camera over there." So um, so anyway, yeah, I think you're doing God's work. Keep it up. Don't let the bastards get you down. And I'm going to keep doing what I do, and I hope that your viewers and your listeners out there will keep doing what they're doing, because it's important. And it's not a fight we're going to lose. It's just from battle to battle. It's gonna take some perseverance and some actual bravery to face what it is we're going to have to face. But what good is this life God gave you if you're not doing something that's worth doing, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think you're doing great work as well. And I think I thank you for being on this podcast for the fifth time.
Well, I'm humbled. I told you I wanted to be the Alec Baldwin of guests on your podcast. Um, and so I appreciate it.
Yeah, as long as we're not, at the shooting range or, have a gun in our
Exactly.
hands, I think we're
Don't
okay.
want, yeah, we have no worries there. Uh,
Y- Yeah. And I think just to circle it back to where we started, right? I think you made such a great point about having bravery. Having bravery, if it's a direct assault where you see just devastation and terrible things happening in our lives, either caused by us, caused by somebody else, or if it's something that's a subtle attack, to have bravery in those moments and to know that we have autonomy to make decisions.
yeah.
And I think why this came to me, this podcast idea and weaving in the Exorcist, right, is because there were times in my life that I felt like I was possessed almost, right? Like I remember this one time I had this relapse. It felt like I was in this trance. Like I just felt like I didn't have any other choice. That it just mounted up this pressure to where I said, "Hey, I just if I don't relieve this feeling that I have, if I just keep letting this pressure build, that I'm just not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to live." It's almost like that's how it felt, was you just have one choice that you need to make right now. And that choice is to go consume porn.
Well, let's
And
remove the filter. That is possession.
yeah, big time.
So so there you go. Instead of saying it was like that, it is that.
Yeah, yeah, because I I still had a choice I could have made, but in my mind, it just felt like there wasn't any other choice.
Right.
And I think at the time it was because I just wasn't really connected with God. I was not, I was not going to church. I was not really connected with my men's group anymore. And instead of knowing that I have Christ at my side, that I have my values at my side, that I have this marriage, instead, it was like the only thought that was in my head was to go back to this thing. Like I had no other choice. So yeah, I think at those moments of time, I was possessed to do the things that I didn't want to do. And now on the other side of that, in my recovery with a clear mind, with a sober mind, I can see where the subtle attack comes from, and I can head it off before it even grows and just keep the door shut in my personal life, in my relationship with my girlfriend, with other people. And I think it comes out of truth and out of living in the truth and honesty and being honest with yourself ultimately, right?
Absolutely.
With the thoughts that you're having, with what actions you want to take because of those thoughts. And I think that's a really important thing for the people listening is that you have the power to make a different decision.
Yeah.
You have that power.
And if you recognize the enemy and can smile, don't forget what Thomas More says. The proud spirit cannot stand being laughed at. And so when you get to a point in your life where you understand where it's coming from, who it is, and what it is, and you can smile at it, the kind of bravery we were talking about, it takes two kinds of bravery. When there's a direct assault, you've got to have the kind of bravery where you can recognize it for what it is and stand up to it and do what needs to be done. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But for the subtle seduction, the kind of bravery that you have to have is the one who can stand up in the midst of a crowd and say no,
Mm.
regardless consequences are going to be in that crowd. And I think we have to possess both kinds of things.
To possess, but not to be possessed.
Exactly.
Mm.
So bringing it back around to The Exorcist, my mom's objection was that the Exorcist seemed to show the ineffectiveness of good against evil, when in fact what it shows is the effectiveness, the simple effectiveness of good against evil. It's simply a matter of standing up and meeting it, recognizing what it is, and understanding that it has no power over you. None, except the power that you give it. And so,
Yes, yes.
just so no. And I know that sounds way easier than it is, folks.
It's not easy. It's hard, but I think it gets easier the more that you practice that act of bravery, that act of courage, standing up. It becomes more kind of like porn was almost second nature to me, like a muscle memory.
Yeah.
Now standing up to porn and seeing it is now my muscle memory. It's now
Yeah.
second nature to where I've replaced that habit with a habit of accountability and living in the truth, sticking to my principles, understanding what my principles are and
Yeah.
what flies in the face of my principles. And for me, it's porn. That
Yeah.
directly flies in the face of my principles and my values, my faith. So yeah, I've got to stand up to it every day. It's not like I don't every day. Every day I make a decision to stand up to it.
And this is why we Catholics call the uniforms that nuns wear habits.
Ah, okay.
They are habitas. They are the outward reminders of conforming the inner life to an outer practice.
Ah, okay. Makes
And
sense.
Plato says that the whole task of education is to teach the child what he ought not like before he is of the age of reason, so that he's in the habitus of good.
Hmm.
And it makes the choice for the good easier when you're in the habit of the good. And that's how we train our soldiers. Um, And so I think if even one person watching or listening to this says, "Oh, if I change my practice and I make it a habit, this will be easier for me." And I've always said that to my kids. Sometimes when you're facing a huge problem, change little things.
Hmm.
Take a left instead of a right. I stopped drinking bourbon because it was a problem. And the way I did it was I stopped stopping at the liquor store on the way home from my night class on Tuesday. I just stopped because I realized if I don't have bourbon in my house, I won't drink it. And that kicked it for me because I didn't want to go to a meeting, you know? But I had gotten to that point where it was like, do I need to go to a meeting? I got a problem. And so I was like, I don't want to go to a meeting, but I'll do this. Let me see if this will work. And it did for me. Not going to say that it's going to work for everybody or it would work with me with everything. But for that thing, that's all I needed.
That's a great point, though. I mean, that's so true, though. It's these little things, right?
Yeah.
And there's a great Viktor Frankl quote that I love. I talk about it all the time, but the freedom lies in the space between the stimuli and the response.
Yeah.
Like if you can find where that space is, like you said, hey, I'm not going to stop by the liquor store. You're creating a space between whatever's stimulating you to go there and then what that response is. Because then you in that space, you are able to then, like you said, take a different turn. And then your responses start becoming different. And because now it's like when I'm triggered to look at porn, I write. And that's
Right.
not like every time I write, I'm triggered to look at porn. But if there's something that's a topic in my head or something that I think of, that's when I am most, I would say, fired up to write something about it, is
Yeah.
when that pull comes at me. I'm like, okay, now I got to write about it. I got to talk about it. Because for me, it's
Right.
a way that I can create space and I can choose a different response to that stimuli. Because the stimuli, I think, you can do things, I think, to change your environment to where the stimuli are different. Like in a way, hey, I'm not going to stop. I might take a different route home that's not
Yeah.
going to pass the liquor store. So you
Yeah.
can, I think, in some ways change your environment. But with porn, it's what makes it difficult is to even be on the internet. You're already putting yourself at risk to see something or to, because now it's like with any social media site, gosh, you're going to see something. Even on
Yeah.
Substack, people just post things that you could call it art, I guess, but it's like a woman without her top on. And you're like, okay, well, I don't really need to see that, you know?
Well, but
And it's like,
also
what do you do?
for functioning adults, we fall into patterns.
Yeah.
So you're using the internet at your job in your office during the day and you're exposed to stuff and you don't have one inclination that you're going to indulge in that at all. But when you go to bed at night and it's dark, reasonably private, and your phone is right next to you at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
get an alarm clock and move your phone.
Yep. Yep.
Get into the habit of saying, hey, after 9 o'clock, my phone is in the basket over here and I'm not looking at it. And I'm going to finish my night and I'm going to say my prayers and I'm going to set my alarm on a mechanical clock. And like I moved to the country and I have to hang up my keys every day. I have to put my wallet in the basket. I have to do certain things to make sure that I don't lose them. They're little things, but it works. And so I would encourage your viewers to just start with little things. Start with one little thing. And let me ask you a question because you know this as well as I do as a sinner. When we were in the sinful life, every single time we did it, it was followed by guilt without one exception. But once we started to get in the habit of the good, not one time when we did the good was it not followed by a feeling that was not guilt.
Yeah.
Correct?
Correct. Yeah, there's never been a time where I did something positive or something good, and I look back, I'm like, why did I do that? Which is totally true. Or just having this feeling of shame. Oh, hey, I just helped my little sister and I actually just to share something personal. My little sister and I haven't drank alcohol now for close to 6 months now, and I decided to walk sobriety with my little sister and said, "Hey, let's do this together. Let's," because I think it's definitely impacted her. Definitely times in my life too. It's impacted me, and it's correlated with my porn use. But that's something positive where I don't ever feel shame, think about shame as me walking sobriety with my little sister as a big brother. I don't look
Right.
back at that with guilt and say, oh man, like, why did I do this? Because I've already seen the positive impact that's made in her life. Like, she's getting back into art, into ice skating. She's got her own place. And I can just see all the positive things that are happening in my life, in her life, in my life. And the real feeling that I have is an immense feeling of being proud of her and just being happy for her.
Yeah.
And I don't have, so that's a great point that you just made, just to reiterate. We do something like look at porn. What do we feel right away? Guilt, shame. You do something good, helping somebody else out with something or doing something good for yourself. You don't have that feeling. It's never there, right? I always kind of think about it too in a way of having a good workout. I used to do a lot of hot yoga back in the day where,
Hmm.
gosh, I think I was going 3 times a week. I was doing total vinyasa, hot yoga. Every time I went in there, I'm like, this is going to kick my ass. Like, this is going to suck. I'm going to want to quit halfway through because I literally am so hot. I'm sweating everywhere. I'd literally be doing like a downward dog or something. My hands would be just sliding on the mat because of my sweat. But
Right.
then every time I was done with the class, I was like, man, I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad I went. Because always at the end in corpse pose, I'm just praying to Christ and being grateful for the life that I have. And that could be the same as like a workout or a hike or doing something in nature, right? You never look back at those and say, man, I wish I wouldn't have gone on that hike.
Right. And that's the difference between infernal suffering and purgatorial suffering. In purgatorial suffering, the difference between that and infernal suffering is that infernal suffering there is no end. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. But when you suffer in purgatory, you suffer like an athlete. It's training. And every step gets you closer to the goal, which is paradise, and it's worth it. And so there is no guilt involved in it. It's painful, absolutely, no doubt. But every step is a success. It's one step closer to the reward. Um, Whereas the suffering in Inferno, in hell doesn't end. That was a final choice, and you made it. But when the suffering is in this change of habit, the small change of habit, which is painful, every day it gets easier. Um, and like you said, you acknowledged, and I acknowledge, when you do the good, not in recompense for your bad, because it's not going to balance out. You know that, right? You know what I mean? We go through phases where we want to make it a trade off, like that song "Seasons of the Sticks." I figure if I can leaven the bad I inherited from my dad with the good that I do, then it'll all be all right. We all know that doesn't work. Just commit to the good. Forget about the bad.
Yeah, it's basically what you're saying, I think, in a way, is like it's not your works that you're measured upon. It's I think doing good for the sake of the good.
Yeah, and that's an interesting way to put it because the Catholics and Protestants have a difference between the work, the way the works manifest. How do they participate in salvation? And what I would say is that your works are your accepting the graces freely offered and participating in salvation in the opposite way that the demon wants you to participate in your own destruction in the possession.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I'm,
profound.
I might be done on that one. Um, that was pretty good.
Yeah, well, hey, yeah, we'll land the plane. Definitely, I think we're gonna have a podcast pretty soon on some topics that I think bubbled up in my mind and in your mind.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think main takeaway, hopefully for people, is that And this is something I was thinking about while you were talking about hell in a way is I think the personal hell that I've been in before in my life when I was struggling with porn was agreeing to the false belief that it was hopeless
Right.
and internalizing the belief that I couldn't live without this with this. I can't live without porn. It's not possible. And that is a lie, but it's also a hopelessness, right? And I think that's really true in just on earth, right? Not even speaking about the spiritual,
Right.
but I think we can live a life that is a personal hell and a hell upon others if we internalize this belief of hopelessness.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, and what I firmly believe in as well, is when we can take in stride our brokenness, we can take in stride these things that we need to work on. But like you said, with a smile on our face, with hope that whatever these actions that we're doing in our lives, and I've been there, and you all know that listening and looking at watching this, that I've been there in my personal life to where I didn't think there was no hope for me. And I clung on to the belief of hope. I clung on to the belief that, hey, I can figure this out and I can live a different life. I can live a life that is more fulfilling.
Yeah.
I can live a life where I can actually exceed whatever these expectations are. And I guess that's the thing about being hopeless is anything really can exceed those expectations if you put in some work and some action. You can get from that rock bottom moment, right? To
Yeah.
where you can pick yourself up because that hole might seem deep, really deep. And it might be this repeated cycle to where you keep finding yourself in this hole. I think sometimes we forget about the small victories in our lives, right? Even if it seems inconsequential. I sometimes talk about this with my little brother when we're checking in with each other daily. It could just be a little thing, right? You get a trigger to, hey, just scroll a little longer, or maybe even check out a girl for more than 3 seconds or whatever. But when
Yeah.
you make a decision to not do that, to not partake in it, that's a small victory. Like that's stuff that will add up in your life. So
Yeah.
I really
Absolutely.
loved what you had to say today.
Well, let me end by saying this. We cannot forget that in the entirety of creation, the only creature that was made in the image and likeness of God was us. Angels are in the likeness. Animals, vegetables, and minerals are in the image. We are in the image and likeness.
Mm.
And therein lies your hope. And by the way, that's why the devil's after you, because he's envious. He can't be what you are.
Yeah, and we can end on this quote that you brought up, uh, because I think this fits in and ties nicely to the theme, as well as just to put some words, I think, to this idea of possession or this idea of something that's good like sex and then porn undermining it. But this is a chilling quote from The Exorcist 3. The demon basically states, I must admit, it makes me a bit giddy, the prospect of working through you, a sculptor with his clay, a composer with his notes, a demon with his meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just something to chew on, something to think about, right? Is when we're letting this into our lives, we're not really in control.
Right. But the only way that we can lose that control is by giving it up. I had this conversation on X a few where people didn't understand what I was saying, but you cannot become unvirgin by being raped because you did not grant consent. It can't be taken away. Your human dignity cannot be taken away. You can only give it. It can't be taken away. Like, think of it this way. The only things that you can give away are things that you own. If you can't give it away, then it's yours in stewardship. And so you can make a taxonomy of all your talents and graces and all of that stuff and make a decision. If you can give it away, then you own it. But if you own it, it can't be stolen. It can be violated. It can be disrespected. It can be, right? But it doesn't change any of your status. And I think this is partly what The Exorcist is about, is to convince us that something that somebody else does to us can change our status and convince us that we are less than what we are.
Mm.
And that's not true. That's the big lie. That's the big lie. Or that something that somebody else, and this is Aristotle, could give us is actually essential to our being. And that's not true either. So if my self-esteem relies upon my reputation, which relies upon the opinion of other men and women, then I have my hopes in a falsehood. Those are things that other people can take away or give, which means they're never mine.
Right.
My reputation is never mine. That's why I do my vanity thing on X. Because I don't care about that.
Right.
If that makes sense. I make it look like I care about that, but honest, Mac, you know me. I don't. And I'm just trying to do a comic and gentle reminder to people like, hey, it's a trap.
Right.
Like if you fall into the trap that you have to depend on like the popularity of yourself on TikTok, you're in for something bad.
Yeah, and I think that's something too that relates to struggling with porn is it's a trap that keeps us stuck as we think, how could somebody love me? Or how would people treat me if they knew?
Right.
And it's always dependent on other people and what their perception would be versus look at yourself and say, hey, I can take control of this situation and
Right.
how I feel about myself, right? Because I think when we reclaim that power of our identity and our values, our foundations, that's really what matters at the end of the day. And then I think the byproduct of that is people see who you are and you're not putting on a mask for people. You're just
Right.
you're coming clean with yourself and then hopefully through with others too. And then that's I think where the real work begins, where you're not worried about that anymore. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I had to put that at the door when I ate a lot of humble pie myself. So I can't care what other people think. I have to take care of myself. Like I have to do this for me. I have to do this for myself, my dignity. And I think
Right. And
that's where recovery can really start, I think, when we have that.
absolutely. And when you come out the other end, you have to take seriously the impression that you make upon other people. And if you are dedicated to the good, here's my thing. I want people to look at me and say, what the hell does that guy have? Because damn, you know, and I would rather that, you know what I mean, than whatever the alternative is. But it does mean that I have to be honest and I have to persevere and I have to take I have to set my chin like flint sometimes and take the slings and arrows that are going to come after me, which they do.
Yep, same here.
You know what I mean? But I just let it roll. I've got some trolls. I'm like, dude, you seriously have a crush on me. You need to cut it out because everybody can see it. No, and again, I'm saying it with a smile on my face. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
like, what is your purpose? Like, your purpose is on social media just to say mean things to people that you don't like. Okay, well, if that's your thing, that's not my role is not to cure you. Mac, I don't adopt puppies because I have responsibilities. so my plate's full.
Yeah.
And so it's been easy for me on social media after a learning curve, you know what I mean?
Right.
Not to get engaged in that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Because, I'm going to touch the people that I touch, but sometimes I'm not the guy.
Yeah.
And that's okay with me. That's fine.
That's important. It's an important
Yeah.
reminder.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're wrapping it up hopefully I'm saying it now. We're wrapping it up. landing the plane. But yeah, just I really appreciate it. Just you spending the time with me. And any last I know you provided already, but just any last words for the listeners before we
Well,
hop off.
no, I just want to encourage them. I want to thank you for having me on again. It's an honor, and it really is humbling to me that people out there are struck by some of the things I might say. I always get a lot out of these conversations too, Max. So don't not pat yourself on the back a little bit for bringing so much to the table, because it means a lot. And I just want to say I want to keep doing stuff like this for the benefit of people who need it, and might hear one thing, just one little thing that will help them, because they're worth it. And so if that's the only thing that gets you started on that little change of habit, that's true. And that's why the demons are trying to get you. It's because you're good. It's not because you're bad.
Great point. Great point. All right, everyone. Well, you can find Dr. Borse on X, on YouTube. I'll put those in the show notes. And everybody, keep fighting the good fight. Break free, stay free, be free. And we'll talk to you soon. Much love, everybody. God bless.
Thank you.